Imagine waking up and just realizing that the rules that kept you safe yesterday, whether that's a massive international nuclear treaty or literally just the canvas tent you sleep in at night, are suddenly entirely useless.
Right. Yeah, it completely forces a behavioral reset.
Exactly. You step outside, and the physical environment, the technology on your street, the global power structures, they've all just shifted overnight.
You're no longer navigating a stable system at that point. You're simply trying to adapt fast enough to survive all the new variables.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We have this stack of sources today that, on the surface, they look like a totally random cross-section of June 14th, 2026.
They really do.
Yeah, we are looking at international geopolitical dispatches, local Colorado civic alerts, urgent U.S. Forest Service orders, and regional news reports. But the through line connecting all of this for you is survival through adaptation.
Which is such a critical theme right now.
Absolutely. We are looking at a world where humans are being forced to rapidly adjust their behaviors, whether that's, global superpowers pulling back from the brink of war, or local Colorado communities fighting off erratic wildfires, bears, and just unregulated e-bike chaos.
Yeah, our mission today is really to synthesize these events for you. We want to look at the mechanics behind these shifts. Why is the infrastructure we rely on failing, and how are people recalibrating their lives when those old rules just no longer apply?
Let's start at the absolute highest stakes possible, the global stage. According to PBS reporting, the United States and Iran have reached an agreement to end the war that began 3 months ago, back on February 28th.
Right, and this conflict has been devastating. It resulted in thousands of deaths, and that includes the death of Iran's supreme leader.
So what is the immediate fallout here? What's the shift?
Well, the immediate operational shift is that President Trump has ordered an end to the U.S. naval blockade of Iranian ports.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's a massive development. It essentially reopens the Strait of Hormuz to global shipping. The formal signing of the deal is actually scheduled for this Friday in Switzerland, and it's being mediated by Pakistan and Qatar.
Got it. And the political context back home.
President Trump is praising the relationship with Iran as, quote, professional, unquote. And the reports note he is really seeking an exit from this conflict ahead of the midterm elections.
Obviously, this agreement brings immediate relief to a heavily strained global economy, especially considering the Strait of Hormuz is the central artery for a huge percentage of the world's oil, natural gas, and fertilizer.
It's vital.
But this isn't exactly a universally celebrated victory lap, right? Impartial reporting shows the Israeli government, along with several prominent Republicans, are arguing that this new agreement doesn't actually improve upon the terms of the original 2015 nuclear deal.
No, it doesn't. The friction really centers on the mechanics of uranium enrichment.
Right.
The International Atomic Energy Agency reports that Iran currently possesses about 440.9 kilograms, so roughly 972 pounds, of highly enriched uranium.
That sounds like a lot.
It is. And this stockpile is enriched up to 60% purity. Now, under the terms of this new agreement, the specifics regarding what to do with that specific stockpile are essentially just being kicked down the road.
Wait, really? So they didn't figure that part out?
No, the details are supposed to be finalized in 60 days.
I think we need to pause on that 60% number. Because intuitively, if I hear 60%, it doesn't sound like it's immediately knocking on the door of, say, 90% weapons grade threshold.
Right. It sounds like they are barely past the halfway mark.
Exactly. Is that a misconception?
It is the crucial misconception about how enrichment works. It is absolutely not a linear scale.
Oh, okay. How so?
Well, the vast majority of the industrial effort, like the real heavy lifting of separating isotopes, that happens just getting natural uranium from roughly 0.7% up to 5% purity for civilian reactor use.
So the hardest part is right at the beginning.
Exactly. Once you have a stockpile sitting at 60% purity, you have already completed something like 95% of the actual work required to build a weapon.
Wow. I had no idea.
Yeah, taking it from 60 to 90% isn't a massive industrial leap at all. It is a very, very short technical step. And that is exactly why delaying the resolution of that specific stockpile for another 60 days is creating such intense anxiety among critics of the deal.
Okay, let's unpack this. It sounds like we successfully put out the immediate fire, like the naval blockade and the active strikes. But we agreed to just leave this highly pressurized gas leak sitting in the basement for another 2 months.
That's a great way to put it.
I just have to wonder, is returning to this new quote-unquote status quo actually a sustainable position for global shipping?
Well, the status quo has permanently altered. A 3-month war fundamentally changes the leverage dynamic. By weathering this conflict, Iran has effectively demonstrated its capacity to deeply influence and even choke off one of the most vital shipping lanes on the planet. They have proven they can absorb a blockade and still dictate terms regarding the strait.
So it's a totally new baseline.
Exactly. Both sides are stepping back, not because the threat is completely resolved, but because they are adapting to a new, highly volatile power dynamic.
It is a calculated pause in a highly combustible environment. And, the concept of navigating a volatile, shifting landscape brings us directly to our next piece of source material.
It really does.
Because while international diplomats are navigating a combustible geopolitical situation, local authorities in Colorado are trying to manage a literally combustible physical environment right now.
Yes. The physics of the atmosphere over Eagle County right now are creating a terrifying scenario.
Terrifying is the word.
According to the official grounding memos, the fire danger across the White River National Forest is officially rated as very high, and the Rifle District is currently sitting at high.
And because of these metrics, Eagle County implemented Stage 1 fire restrictions this past Wednesday, June 10th, starting right at 12:01 a.m.
Right.
The rules are super strict. Campfires are only allowed in designated metal fire grates within developed campgrounds. Smoking outside enclosed vehicles or buildings is totally banned unless you are in a completely barren area, and obviously, absolutely no explosive materials.
Which makes sense.
But beyond the restrictions, the National Weather Service has issued an active red flag warning today.
We are looking at a really dangerous convergence of critical factors. Relative humidity is plummeting to between 7 and 12%, and that's combined with southwest winds sustaining at 20 to 30 miles per hour.
And gusts hitting up to 50 miles per hour, which is just insane. But I have to push back a little on how we communicate this to the public.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, if you live in Colorado, you hear red flag warning constantly throughout the summer. It creates this alert fatigue. People just start tuning it out because they assume it just means, oh, it's hot and dry again.
Yeah, that's a very real problem.
So why does this specific mathematical combination, 7% humidity and 50 mile per hour gusts, warrant a total shutdown of normal outdoor behavior?
It comes down to vapor pressure deficit and flame mechanics. When humidity drops below 10%, the atmosphere literally acts like a giant sponge.
Okay.
It aggressively pulls moisture out of every pine needle, every branch, every blade of grass. A living tree effectively becomes kiln-dried kindling.
Wow.
But the real danger is that 50-mile-per-hour wind. Wind doesn't just push a fire along. It physically lays the flame angle down flat against the ground.
Oh, I see.
This preheats and ignites the fuel ahead of the fire line before the main blaze even reaches it.
The alerts use the phrase rapidly and erratically, and that word erratic seems to be the most terrifying part of this entire equation.
It is. It's the defining characteristic of a wind-driven fire. The heat gets so intense that the fire creates its own microclimate. It generates its own localized wind systems.
Basically making its own weather.
Exactly. It throws embers miles ahead of the main front, starting spot fires across highways and rivers. In those conditions, firefighters completely lose the ability to model the fire's path. The normal rules of engagement disappear. You can't fight an erratic fire. You can only evacuate and adapt to where it decides to go.
The environment is just dictating entirely new terms of survival. And it's not just the climate forcing us to change how we camp, The local wildlife is literally changing the physical architecture of how we sleep outside.
Oh, the Gore Creek situation?
Yes. According to our sources, the bears at Gore Creek have forced a massive rule change.
USFS Forest Order Number 2026-08 is officially in effect, and that runs from June 9th all the way through October 4th. The Forest Service has instituted a strict emergency ban at the Gore Creek campground due to persistent black bear activity.
And the specifics of this ban are wild. You cannot use soft-sided tents, no pock-up trailers, no soft-sided slide-out campers, and absolutely no rooftop tents.
None of it.
And the enforcement is incredibly aggressive. Violating this order is a Class B misdemeanor carrying massive fines. We're talking up to $5,000 for an individual and up to $10,000 for an organization.
Yeah, to understand the severity of a $5,000 fine just for pitching a tent, we really have to look at the psychology of habituation.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, to a bear, a nylon tent was historically just a strange, neutral object in the woods. But humans have continuously encroached on these wildlife zones, bringing tons of high-calorie food, Once a bear learns that a soft-sided tent is basically a giant nylon wrapper full of
Their
calories.
learned behavior is almost impossible to break.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me, though. Are
Hmm.
we essentially conceding the woods back to the bears? It feels like we are being forced to wear armor just to sleep outside. I mean, a $5,000 fine isn't just a slap on the wrist. That's the Forest Service saying, you are the problem here.
They are saying exactly that. The Forest Service recognizes that the cognitive map of the bears has permanently changed. We are just no longer the apex rule makers in that specific ecosystem.
Right.
The bears are operating on a biological imperative to consume calories before winter. Our technology, the lightweight nylon tent, is no longer a sufficient structural barrier in that equation.
It's just a false sense of security.
Yeah. The fine is massive because one camper with a soft tent doesn't just put themselves at risk. They reinforce the bear's habituation, which endangers every subsequent camper and ultimately dooms the bear, which usually has to be euthanized if it becomes too aggressive. It is a forced, extreme behavioral modification for humans because our environment has adapted to us in a really dangerous way.
We are introducing lightweight technology into an environment and finding out it fails catastrophically against the reality of the space,
Exactly.
which perfectly transitions us from the ancient hazards of the forest to the synthetic hazards of our own civic trails. The community feeds are just ablaze right now regarding the e-bike safety debate in Eagle County and across Colorado.
Oh, yeah. The popularity of e-bikes has exploded exponentially. But the friction point is that the civic infrastructure and the legal frameworks simply haven't kept pace with the hardware.
Not at all. People are reporting young, unhelmeted riders blowing through stop signs, weaving through pedestrians, and treating recreational paths like personal racetracks.
It's chaotic.
It really is. And this debate has a deeply tragic undertone right now. The sources detail a horrific incident from Thursday night where an e-bike rider died after fleeing police and riding directly onto eastbound Interstate 70 near Steel Street in Denver, where they were struck by a vehicle.
It is a devastating illustration of what happens when high-speed technology bleeds into an infrastructure governed by completely incompatible rules.
I often hear people blame the towns, asking why municipalities are always 5 steps behind the technology. I know Eagle implemented specific e-bike regulations back in 2024 to try and ensure safety, but civic compliance is clearly still a mess.
Yeah, enforcement is tough.
But honestly, I look at the physics of it, and giving a teenager a 75-pound e-bike that can hit 28 miles per hour feels no different than handing them the keys to a quiet motorcycle without requiring a license. Is this really a failure of civic infrastructure, or is it a failure of basic consumer regulation?
It is a systemic collision of linear scaling versus exponential scaling. Think of our sidewalks and bike paths like dial-up internet.
Well, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, they were built for a specific slow speed of human and analog bicycle traffic. Suddenly, consumers can go online, buy a high-powered motor, and drop a fiber optic vehicle onto a dial-up pathway. The kinetic energy involved is just massive.
Right.
A heady e-bike moving at 28 miles per hour has exponentially more destructive force in a collision than a 30-pound analog bike moving at 12 miles per hour.
Because kinetic energy squares with velocity. The faster you go, the force of impact multiplies.
Exactly. Our infrastructure relies on the predictable physics of human-powered movement. When you bypass those physical limitations with an electric motor, but you still rely on the old analog rules.
Like trusting a painted white line to separate a pedestrian from a vehicle moving at car speeds.
Exactly. The system just breaks down. The tragedy on I-70 is the ultimate extreme of this. An interstate highway operates on very rigid survival rules designed exclusively for multi-ton, high-speed vehicles. When micromobility enters that space, the physics are fatal. We are essentially expecting 20th century concrete to solve 21st century technological behavior.
Speaking of 20th century concrete and rigid logistical rules, if you are planning to use the interstate tonight, you need to be prepared for a massive analog roadblock.
Yes, for travelers navigating Garfield County, there is a major overnight westbound closure on I-70 starting tonight, Sunday, June 14th.
The highway will be completely shut down from milepoint 83.5 at Rulison, stretching to milepoint 87 at West Rifle. This closure begins at 9:00 p.m. tonight and runs until 7:00 a.m. on Monday.
And all westbound traffic is being detoured onto US 6, so crews can safely remove concrete barriers and perform paint striping.
After discussing erratic wildfires and unregulated technology, this I-70 closure is actually a perfect example of controlled, planned adaptation.
It really is.
The authorities are temporarily suspending the rules of the highway to upgrade the infrastructure safely. You slow down, You follow the detour signs and the system works precisely as intended.
It is a highly managed inconvenience.
But even with managed detours, between the geopolitical tension, the extreme fire weather, the $5,000 tent fines, and the kinetic chaos of e-bikes, the modern world feels incredibly heavy right now.
It takes a toll.
It does. But if the sources provided an event today that feels like the ultimate psychological palate cleanser.
Ah, yes. The Beaver Creek Classic 3D Archery Shoot.
Taking place today at the Beaver Creek State Wildlife Area. Registration opened at 8:00 a.m., and the shooting kicked off at 9:30 a.m. And when you look at the mechanics of archery, it is the absolute antithesis of everything else we've discussed today. It requires total stillness. You are controlling your breathing, focusing on a single stationary target. There are no exponential variables.
Archery provides a deeply necessary psychological retreat. Our brains are currently overloaded trying to process exponential technology and shifting global threats, but a bow and arrow operate on total mechanical predictability.
Right.
The physics of pulling a bowstring and releasing an arrow are exactly the same today as they were 1,000 years ago.
You are stepping into an environment where you are entirely in control of the kinetic energy. If you miss the target, the rules didn't change. You just need to adjust your grip. It is reclaiming a tiny piece of analog predictability in a world that refuses to stand still.
Engaging in that kind of precision-based, ancient discipline isn't just recreation. It really is a way to ground the human nervous system against the hyper-acceleration of the modern era.
Which brings us right back to the core mission of today's deep dive. Whether we are analyzing international nuclear treaties balancing on a 60-day knife's edge, or adapting to the terrifying physics of a 50-mile-per-hour wind system, conceding sleeping territory to habituated bears, or trying to survive the friction between high-speed e-bikes and old sidewalks. Survival in June of 2026 demands constant active adaptation.
You cannot rely on yesterday's concrete barriers to protect you today.
No, you can't. The landscape is dynamic, and our behavioral flexibility is our most important survival tool. If you want to keep this conversation going with us, or if you want to dive even deeper into the specific sources and data we unpack today, head over to vailychat.web.app.pec, open do re mi fa sol la ti do.
We've spent this deep dive analyzing how rules, international treaties, $5,000 tent fines, highway closures, and e-bike regulations are created to keep us safe in a chaotic world. But ask yourself this. As our environment, our climate, and our technology continue to evolve drastically faster than our laws can possibly keep up, at what point does our reliance on rules actually become a vulnerability? When the unexpected happens tomorrow, are you waiting for somebody to hand you a new rule book, or are you already adapting?
The barriers are definitely moving. Keep your eyes open. Until next time.